Welcome back, Planet Earth, to All the Cars I've Loved Before, your automotive podcast where, hey, talk about life lessons through cars. And we know that every car tells a story because this is what we get. Email after email, text after text, phone call after phone call, engagement after engagement. We have a lot to get to today. Check us out, carslove.com. And remember to forward the show if you find it interesting. We're going to run into you at the nearest Cars and Coffee or the nearest car show as the weather's changing here. We're going to get to that in a minute. Make sure you're following, downloading, sharing. Help us to kind of get the word out as we can here. And very important, we're saying as the weather changes here in Florida, you won't believe, Doug, the stunning weather transformation. We've gone from 80 degrees with a 80% humidity to about 76 with 80% humidity. I pulled out the parka, okay, and the thermal socks. You know how it is, right?
Yep.
You got that yet?
We're in the 50s and 60s now.
Oh,
I think it was 49 degrees this morning.
So how many igloos do you and the kids make?
Oh, you used to live up here. You're just spoiled.
Can't do it, man. I cannot do it. But hey, we did want to mention here, moving away from weather. All right, so get out and enjoy the communal events with cars. They're happening down here on the Gulf Coast too, as the weather changes. But we're real happy. We're starting to get a lot of responses coming in from our episode with Nicole Johnson. Check it out. Just a huge thank you to her. She was a blast to talk with. We mentioned her name in pre-show prep to today's guest, who pivoted to a wall, and of course he's got some monster truck love there too. So yeah, just wanted to. Have you been in touch with her recently, or have we heard back from her? She was so gracious with her time.
She's been so busy. Talk about some content. Check out her YouTube channel. Check out, we have a great link to everything. carslove.com/Nicole Johnson. And it'll take you to all her stuff.
Perfect. Yeah. Her show Detour is a trip. It is so much fun. Check it out. What else were we talking about here? So the past few weeks, we've been talking a bit about car themes in pop culture, in music, in movies, in books, in TV shows. A little bit of a different curveball today. And this is going to be a callback later on today. In today's show, as we pull Andrew into the discussion, but car museums. Doug and I had this bucket list item. Well, this podcast was a bucket list item, so we get to check that one off. But when his kids are at the house, my kids are at the house, we're going to go on this worldwide, legendary car museum tour. Many in Italy, Germany, obviously, but
Detroit.
You got it. West Coast, East Coast, everywhere. There's a really neat one in here. This just popped into my mind, and I'm going to say it apropos of nothing. It's the Tallahassee Auto Museum, which Doug has been to. Neat place. You would not believe the cars. It's also got boats in the collection, antique cash registers, anything mechanical. This place has it in spades. So we went there before. I've taken my kids there. It's a few hours down I-10, and check it out if you can. But one that came to mind was we want to give a quick shout out here too, was the let's see, I thought I had it here. The museum in Hershey, Pennsylvania. I had it up.
America's Transportation Museum.
Yeah, blast. So much fun. Vintage Pontiacs. Did they have like a Duesenberg, a Bugatti, a bunch of Tuckers, etc., etc.? So yeah, we just want to get the conversation going. Send us some notes, send us some emails if you've been to one. What was your experience? What did you like? Which one? Doug's been to the Peterson. Took your kids to the Peterson on the West Coast, right?
No, not the kids. They wouldn't have lasted there. But the Peterson, I spent 4 hours there, and I needed more
Just
time.
getting started. Yeah, just getting
Yep,
started
their
with it.
vault is
Excellent.
amazing. But as I often do, and I seem to not be able to not get through an episode without saying it. At the museum in Hershey, which by the way is near Hershey Park, which is a
Oh
lot of fun.
yeah,
The world of
yeah.
chocolate is there. Hershey Park is awesome. I took my son there at the end of this summer. You have to check to make sure it's on display. They have the only DeLorean prototype remaining in the world.
Mm, mm.
There were two, there is only one left. It is there. And it is so awesome seeing it, especially side by side with the actual DeLorean itself. So that car that helped him, get the rest of the money he needed to prove that he could build a car is it's
Yeah,
gorgeous.
fantastic. Yeah, and before we introduce Andrew, real quick, just wanted to pop in with a little bit more information on the museum in Hershey. Check them out. AACAmuseum.org. Again, AACAmuseum.org. It's all one word. It's at 161 Museum Drive in Hershey, Pennsylvania. Hours 9 to 5. I think they're open daily. Very reasonable. Neat experience. So
Yep.
check that out.
Christian, we'll link to them just to make life easier for the listeners.
Yeah.
So it'll be carslove.com/AACA.
Good deal. Good deal. Thank you for that. And with no further ado, we got to bring in today's guest who's got so many really good stories, interesting experience. So how did Andrew come into your life, Doug?
Yeah, so it's one of those stories that involves
Mm-hmm.
Cars and Coffee and involves
Mm-hmm.
Facebook. And I just happened to see I live on what Andrew would call the Western Shore of Maryland. He lives on the
Okay.
Eastern Shore of Maryland. And I just happened to see that the Cars and Coffee in, let's see, what is it? Is it
Queenstown.
Queenstown? Thank you. I always want to say Queens Anne. In Queenstown somebody was going to have a Trabant. And I'm like, I got to go there. I got to meet this guy. And in the small world we live in, I happen to mention to our buddy James McRae, and he's like, "Oh yeah, Andrew's got the Trabant. You should definitely interview him for your podcast." And I went to this small, really nice. They're all great, but just meeting different people than I would meet normally around town. And there's Andrew, only Trabant there. And
So, yeah.
And we've stayed in touch. He's referred me to some other Cars and Coffees that I have to go to. And Andrew, I just saw today the Spy Museum is having maybe I saw it from you. They're having a Trabant parade. It was from you. Now I remember. Yep. And so that's in DC in November, and I assume your Trabant will be there.
Well, sadly, no. Sadly, no. My wife and I, we're local coordinators for one of the big au pair agencies, and the second
that's right.
weekend in November is always our national meeting where hundreds of the local coordinators get together and do training and networking together. And so every year I miss the Parade of Trabants, which is tied to that the second weekend of November, because it's the closest weekend to when the wall came down and the anniversary of the wall crumbling. And when Trabants left East Germany.
Yep. And there's a great story and connection with your wife and Trabants and her native country of origin. And
yeah, she so my wife, I've been a car guy almost longer than I can remember, from matchboxes driving on my knees. And then I was 5, maybe 6, but I think I was 5 when we had family movie night, and I saw the movie American Graffiti for the first time of probably 1,000 times I've seen it, I bet. But I've been a diehard car guy, and unlike a lot of fellas, My parents didn't care about cars. I didn't have an uncle or anybody to show me. So I probably destroyed many cars before I was my late teenage years when I finally got connected to some fellows who could teach me the right way. Had a great friend who was a farmer that taught me how to work on stuff and repair stuff and take care of stuff. He sold me my very first car, which was a '69 VW Bug. I bought it. It was $100, and at the age of 10, I was helping to feed cows and
10?
clean
That doesn't even
clean
sound
up
legal.
stuff.
10?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we're on the Eastern Shore of Maryland. We're like 40 years behind everybody else, especially in those days, right? So,
Well, he didn't have it
yeah. So,
registered. He wasn't driving it. Though we did have somebody
oh,
recently who.
I did drive it a lot,
Oh,
but
okay.
it wasn't registered.
Okay.
It was a lot
We did
of
have
farm
somebody
driving.
on recently, or we did a recording with somebody who's from South Dakota, and they can get a license at age 14 out there, and he had one at age 14.
Really, that's fine. I got my first license at the age of 15 in Maine because at the time that was the age, and I was there for boarding school in my freshman year. So I
Nice.
thought it was very funny to get a lot of speeding tickets that because Maine didn't have any reciprocity agreement with Maryland. So I'd
Nice.
come to Maryland and get speeding tickets and laugh about them. And then when I returned home and got my Maryland license at the age of 16 and immediately got an invitation from the NBA to have a point system conference because of the 6 points that were already on my license. And it was not
we,
so funny then.
we had a policy of not having vigilantes from justice on the program, but I think we just broke it with this guy. Holy mackerel! On the lam from the law. Before we go, no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say no. I'm not. As far as I know, I'm not currently wanted. It's been decades since those.
We'll
days.
see. I think I hear sirens in the background.
But Andrew, you do work with law enforcement. You do work with first responders. You do work with firefighters, and I know we really jumped into you a little bit. But if you don't mind, tell our listeners, right? I know. Tell our listeners what you do, and when you're not buying cars for your family.
Right. So, I grew up in the town of Centerville, which at the time was about 2,000 people. Which now, years later, decades later, it's there's twice as many houses as there were people in those days. But it was sort of a quiet little town. There was nothing to do, and so I joined the fire company because I had no connection to the neighbors or anything. I went to and sort of said, "Hey, this is a lot of fun," and got my EMT license at the age of 16, and
Oh, wow.
started. I was a volunteer fireman and volunteer EMT, and sort of parlayed into getting my paramedic license and a full-time job, and here I am 23 years later, still doing it, and between you and me, like when I'm in the back of the ambulance and I'm with the sick and injured, and I'm just as excited and into it as I was at the age of 16. Fortunately, I've learned a few things along the way, and I'm probably a lot better at it now, I hope. But I I feel like it keeps me young, and it can be a tough job. But I think and I think before the show we were talking a little bit. And I said, I would literally be hating my life, rotting under fluorescent lights for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. Right. So I work 24-hour shifts, and they can be long, and they can be tough, and they can be easy, and they can be everything in between. But it really is. It's a lot of fun, and when you work 2 days a week, it gives you a lot of time for your hobbies. And so if you have expensive hobbies like golf and fishing and traveling, and then you don't get to play with cars. But if you play with cars and you play with cheap cars like I do, then you get to have a lot of fun.
I want to thank you for what you do.
So,
You could do what I do. I could never do what you do. And hats all the way off for you, my man. That is impressive. That is impressive.
And we are the guys who rot under fluorescent.
Right.
You can tell by my ghastly pallor.
Grass is always greener on at least on the other side for me.
Yeah. Well,
Okay.
usually because it's fertilized some kind of way, right?
Yeah.
That's how it
Indeed.
looks green.
Good call. Good call. So my big question is, did you ever work off the $100 that your 10-year-old self bought the VW Buck for?
I did, and so that the fella who is now passed, but his name was John Adams, and he was a great friend and mentor. I was really small when he used to till the fields near our house,
Oh, wow.
and every day, coming back from school as early as kindergarten, I'd see him be like, "Oh, there's Mr. Adams, there's Mr. Adams," and I'd insist on getting out of the car and I'd run out to the field, and he'd let me, I'd climb in the combine or the tractor or whatever, and I just ride around with him and learned by watching, and he taught me how to drive and how to work on stuff and how to swear and how to, I mean, he taught me a lot
It
of
is an
valuable
art.
lessons in life. Yep, absolutely. But so yes, I did. So when around the time I was 9, I started going to his farm and spending a day. He'd come pick me up on Saturday morning, and we'd start with going to have breakfast, and then we'd just sort of do farm chores, and I'd spend all day with him, and he'd bring me home, around dinner time, and um, it was a lot of fun. And so, and he would give me $5 a day for working with him, right, and helping him, as he
That's
called it.
awesome.
Although it was, and I did work off the $100, but it's funny because partway through the $100, I had my first time driving a tractor towing the silage cart. So this is a feed cart for cattle. And it's about 40 feet long with a single axle right in the center.
Wow.
And so we went down the farm lane, which is probably a half a mile, and across the street, and then down maybe another quarter mile is where the silage pit was, where the feed was. So the farm, John's nephew Bill and I each had a tractor and a silage cart, and we went out, and Bill, had the loader on his tractor, so he loaded my cart, and then he loaded his cart, and I helped him get hooked back up, and we took off. And I thought, oh, I'm going to get him, right? And so I made it a race, and so I had that. It was an old John Deere 3020 model, and I had it in high gear, and I was hauling I was I thought I was a NASCAR driver, right? And I took the turn. I'll never forget, right? I'm coming down the road, and I took the turn down the farm lane, and I kept going. And I'm laughing because I had not only gotten back before Bill, I'd gotten unhooked and put the tractor away. And here comes Bill, and he's looking at me, and he's just shaking his head. And I'm thinking, oh, haha, he's mad because I beat him, right? And I'm really quite proud of myself. And, I'm 10 years old. And so he gets unhooked, and he says, "Come on, we got to go up to the house." And we go up to the house, and we find John, who had, kicked off his boots already for the day. And he told John, he said, "You're going to have to come help fix this fence." And I'm kind of thinking, what fence?
Uh-oh.
Not realizing that I tore down about
That
100.
fits.
I tore down about 150 feet of fence because
Oh,
Oh my
the
crap.
tire on the trailer grabbed it, and I had momentum, and full of piss and vinegar, and I
Well,
never looked back.
yeah,
Never
they
looked back.
obviously don't cover not taking out split rail fences when a 10-year-old takes the driving test. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I got to ask here, was the movie Footloose based on your early
Oh, I
life?
was just gonna
Or
say that.
or did I stepped on several punchlines here? But okay,
Yeah.
beautiful. So the
No,
fence got built.
definitely not.
All right.
So we had to rebuild the fence, but one of the what I think was one of my earliest life lessons was as John took me home that day,
Mm.
right? John reached into his wallet and he handed me $5 for my day's pay. And I said, I don't deserve that. And he said,
Jeez.
you know what? Everybody makes mistakes. The important thing is to learn from them. But the deal is you earn $5 a day and you put in a day's work, and here's your pay. And it
Wow.
was it's a moment in my life I'll never forget. And I think it's been a valuable lesson, but it sort of ties into, always do the right thing because it's the right thing, right? And own your mistakes, and people make mistakes, and look past it. I mean, there was a lot at the time. I didn't realize how important that lesson
Yeah.
would be for me.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, he made it that he was obviously a very big influence on your life, a big imprint on your life. That's so you just from a young age, you just were bitten with mechanical things that got things done, things that move, gears.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
And how and why they work. I took apart an
Indeed.
awful lot of stuff before I learned how to put anything together.
Gotcha.
But the sequence is important.
Gotcha. And
So
so the next, let's move along to the next car, a 1984 Nissan Sentra. Nowhere near as cool as the Trabant
no,
Or the
vintage
bug.
Chevy.
yeah, well, right. So the '84 Nissan Sentra Gilligan, I bought from some friends of our family, the Lures family, or actually Lester was the daughter's married name that had driven the car last, but the car had been through a
Okay.
couple of siblings and it needed a clutch, and so a fellow named Ted Lester sold me that car for $1,
Hmm.
and it was about $350 to get a clutch in it and do whatever else it needed to be on the road. And I was great. I was 15, almost 16 years old, and Gilligan was fantastic. And I took my father and a friend of his named Neil Mustin out for a ride at sort of outskirts of town. There was some sightseeing. There was a we always referred to it as the Russian embassy, but it was really just an offsite compound that belonged to the Soviet Union outside of Centerville. It's a place called Pioneer Point, which was and you should Google it. It's a really neat history place historically. The man who built the house had a bunch of kids, and he was a GM executive. So the house, I think the original house had like 12 or 13 bedrooms.
Jeez.
And it's just, probably, I don't know, I'm not sure how big the property is, probably 50 or 100 acres. And it's sort of at where the Corsica River and hits the Chester River, the big waterfront and beach and stuff. But we used to like to go back there, and of course there were guards, and it was considered to be Soviet soil, right? So we weren't allowed too far back there. And as we were leaving, there was a big mud puddle in the road, and you're doing like 30 miles an hour and just going to blast through it, and the road was washed out, and so the front end of the car went underwater, and water came up and slid off the windshield, and somehow we had enough momentum to bounce through it, and the car was known as Gilligan from that point on. And Gilligan
Hmm.
lived a very difficult life with a teenage me, not taking very good care of it, but it was fun. And I was, of all the kids I went to school with and grew up with, I was, except for the farm kids, I was the only one who could drive a stick. Another life skill learned from John
Absolutely.
Adams and farming.
Now,
And so
yeah, the whole so driving it into the first thing that came to my mind was the scene in Risky Business when Joel Goodman um puts his father's car into Lake Michigan. So I dig how we're just kind of going through the movie theme that we brought up kind of at the top of the show. So from American Graffiti to Footloose to Risky Business, I want to bring in another film here, and let's take the next two cars as a couplet, if we can, a duo. The Chevy Coupe that you also own, a 1949, as well as your dream car, the Tucker 48. So can we talk a little bit about where those Tucker was its own film? Let's talk, if we can, about those two cars together, because uh, when we met before the show, Andrew was walking us around his property and showing us, hey, the cars in his barn, and the Chevy's here, Trabant's here. So what struck you about the Chevy Coupe? Why did you have to have that one?
Well, so the Chevy Coupe, the 49 to 51 Chevys have always had a soft spot. I really I like the lines, right? And so one thing that
Absolutely.
we haven't gotten into yet, and you guys don't know about me, is that I'm a colorblind car guy. And
Oh.
so I very much am about the shapes because that's what I
Mm.
pay attention to.
Mm. Hmm.
Right. So paint jobs don't impress me. But I can, I really like cars, and I really pay attention to their shapes. And so that era Chevy is just very appealing to me. I hadn't really thought about the similarities with that and the Tucker. But I was probably, I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly when the Tucker movie came out, but it was fairly fresh, and I watched
Yeah.
it, and the film it drug me in much in the same way that American Graffiti did,
Hmm.
in that I was fascinated, and I was fascinated with the
Yeah.
story and the characters. And the for those not familiar, the Tucker story is it's like Dante's Divine Comedy, right? I mean, it's so sad, and it's so wonderful and so
Good point.
inspiring. And it's such the triumph of the underdog, and a lot of people would say, like, oh, he didn't triumph, right? But he really did, in a
That's right.
way. And we're still talking about him, and it's still, he brought a lot of important things to light and innovation, despite the fact that, no one wanted to talk about how intrinsically unsafe automobiles were, right? Because people weren't
Yeah.
using seatbelts, they didn't have
That's
padded
right.
dashes, they didn't have safety glass, they didn't have disc brakes weren't
Cyclops
popular.
eye. Yeah.
Right. Right. So Tucker originally had the fenders, and with the outside lights were the ones that turned, and the Cyclops was supposed to be fixed. But in wind tunnel
Oh,
testing, they realized that the fenders were rudders, and they made the car very unstable and unsafe. So, from a safety standpoint, having the fenders to be fixed and those headlights to be fixed, and then having that Cyclops eye, and it only comes on when the steering wheel's turned. So when you're just driving straight, actually the third eye is not on. So it
oh, that I didn't know.
you know,
I didn't
so
know.
Me neither.
and so I became fascinated with the Tucker story, and I'm when most of my friends didn't know what a Tucker was, I wanted one, right? And in
Yeah.
the late '90s or very early 2000s, actually, I was in Atlantic City at an auto auction and car show, and a buddy of mine and I had gone up there for the day, and that's when I saw, or at least I thought I saw, my very first in-person Tucker, and I fell to my knees, almost sobbing,
Hmm.
because this car, from a historical significant standpoint, the car had been heavily modified, and I was heartbroken. And I'm like,
Hmm.
who messes with a Tucker, right? I mean, like,
Hmm.
you don't touch up a Picasso, right? You know what I mean?
Well said. Well
Right
said.
on.
Like, right. And
Good
so
point.
I just, and there's some things that are just fragile and precious in life. And, I'm all about modifying cars, but, like, you don't mess with a Tucker. And I couldn't
Yeah.
find anybody around this car on display, but it was airbag. The windows were tinted. It was
Mm.
painted up. The interior was done. It had a Cadillac North Star V8 in the back of it. And I'm like, who does this? Right. And I'm really pretty upset about it. And it had these amazing wheels on it, though. And in the late '90s, early 2000s, no one was running like a 20-inch wheel, but they were like 20-inch wheels. And they're, other than the Tucker family crest, which is about an inch and a half tall, there was nothing visible on the face of the wheel. It was just a solid wall of polished, aluminum or chrome or whatever it was.
Hmm.
And there was no place for hubcap. There was no seam anywhere to hide the lug nuts. There were no lug nuts. And I was fascinated. And I'm like, that was eating at me. And for years it ate at me, because I couldn't find pictures of those wheels online. I searched wheel manufacturers. I couldn't find them. And, fast forward to probably around 2006, and I'm on eBay one night looking for parts because I was building a Model A hot rod. And I saw this buy it now for $125, a complete drop axle front end with disc brakes on it and split wishbone suspension. And I'm like, this is crazy. This is worth like $1,000. Who in their right mind would sell this for $125, right? So I
Mm.
whacked the buy it now, and I sent a message to the seller, and I said, listen, this looks like just what I'm looking for. The price seems to be a little bit cheap. So if it's a mistake, just cancel the auction. There's no hard feelings, right? Because if I had made a mistake as the seller, I would want someone to
Right.
be fair with me, right? And the next morning, I get an email back from the guy, and he said, "Nope, price is right. I just didn't want it to sit around. I don't need it. Glad you can use it."
Price to move.
And I'm like, "Man, this is so cool, right? Wow!" So I drive up to, the Jersey Parkway, and go pick this thing up the following weekend. And I go to this house, and there's this, sort of bland looking, very large barn behind the house, and that's where I meet him. And behind the barn is my front end, and loaded up in the truck. And I said, man, this is a beautiful property. I said, if I had a barn like this, I'd have 1,000,000 cars. He said, oh, you want to see inside? Right. So I walk inside the barn and I'm floored because outside is like, rustic, looks old,
Tatty.
kind
Yeah.
of tatty, right? Inside, it's amazing. There must have been at least a dozen cars inside. There's several lifts. There's billet aluminum everywhere. There's a CNC machine. There's lathe. There's mills. There's all this stuff. And I'm like, pinch me, right? I think I died. I'm in heaven, right? Here it is. And I said, man, I don't mean to pry, right? But like, what is it that you do that you get to play like this, right? And he said,
Good
oh,
question.
I have a shop down the street, right? I build hot rods. And I'm like, man,
There
this
you
is
go.
crazy. And so he shows me a lot of the projects that he's got going on. And the 38 Ford that he had bought that he took my front axle out of because he switched it over to an independent front suspension to be
Okay.
his daily driver. And so and he's telling me, he said, yeah, he said, I had a car at SEMA not so long ago. It's a Willys. I call it the Switchback, but it was all sheet metal, hand fabricated. So it's a tribute car, but it's all metal, no fiberglass or anything. And I'm like, oh man, I'd love to see that. He says, oh sure, come on down. So attached to the house, there's a 3-car garage, and he opens up one of the garage door bays, and I see the most beautiful car I could remember, right? And this
Yeah.
thing was immaculate. And I'm like, dude, this is so cool. And it had those wheels on it. And I dropped to the ground. I'm like, all right, you explain these wheels to me. How do these work? Where do you get them in? I saw these wheels once on a Tucker in Atlantic City. And he said, oh, I built that car too. It's over here. You want to see it? And
Whoa.
I about wet my pants. Right. I'm like, wait, that's yours with the North Star and everything? And he was so surprised that I knew it. So the guy's name is Rob Ida, and he and his father, actually his grandfather was going to be a Tucker dealer and never got a car for his dealership. Never got a car
Which
to
was
display,
part of the problem. Yeah.
which is part of the problem, right? And so he and his father Bob built a fiberglass Tucker. They had a lot to do with the car, with the movie and the Tucker family, and they have Rob and the Ida Automotive team in New Jersey has restored more Tuckers than anybody else. They are like the world's authority on everything that there is Tucker, and they work very closely with the grandchildren of Preston Tucker. At the end of the day, the answer to the wheels was that Rob Ida made them, and the lug nuts go in, the bolts go in from the inside, like from the back side of the car, and they're just super cool. But he is such a neat guy, and I continue to follow him and stalk him on social media and everything. And we've been in contact a few times, and I say like, oh hey, you probably don't remember me. And he's like, sure I do, Andrew. What's up, man? And I'm like, dude, this is ah. So,
I love it. That's and that's interesting. You mentioned that you're drawn to the shapes of those two automobiles, right? The 48 Tucker and your car, the 49 Chevy. They to me, I don't know how to say it, but there's kind of this classic minimalist vibe before the big fins of the 50s, and the lights in a lot of the chrome accents really took over. Maybe that's not fair. What do you think? Is that at all accurate?
Well, I think it is accurate, and I think that I appreciate I appreciate all kinds of different cars and for different reasons, right? But cars of that era, and not necessarily that era. So I'd put like the C3 Corvettes, very very sort of swoopy and curvy. It's like the hottest girl in school, right? Not necessarily the prom queen, right? But the girl with the curves, and there's just something about her, man. And every time you look at her, you get that warm feeling inside, and you just smile, and your body is like, poof, right? And that's it, man. And I
have to have a glass of ice water after all this. My goodness. All right, moving on.
Yeah.
Let's talk about, and we've alluded to this in the discussion, the Trabant. And how did we talked a little bit about how that came in your life, but Doug, you wanted to hear a little something a little further on the Trabant.
Yeah, well, I think there's the personal connection with Andrew and his wife, and when he first saw the Trabant, or learned about Trabants, and I think it was on a trip to Iceland.
Yes. So my wife is from Iceland, and she introduced me to a whole world of cars that I didn't, because of course before the internet and all these YouTube guys and channels and whatnot, there's a lot of cars that never came to the US and couldn't.
Hmm.
The Trabants didn't really leave East Germany until the wall came down in '89, right? And so and there's still, to this day, there's probably somewhere around 200 of them in the US. So having a Trabant and daily driving a Trabant is a lot like being maybe like the fifth coolest guy at fat camp, right? I mean, it's not something it's really not a trophy that anybody wants, um, but it's fun. And through the cars that I've owned and the cars that I've pined after and bankrupted myself with and whatnot over the years, right? Like the struggle for horsepower is a contest. I just, frankly, my pockets aren't deep enough and my arms aren't long enough to win it. And even
Right.
if you do, right, the guy driving around in the Bugatti, Veyron, Chiron, whatever, is can't right. You can't go 300 kilometers an hour on Route 50 on the way to Ocean City, right? Not for very long, at least. And so, part of being a paramedic is having some sense of responsibility for others around me and safety and all that kind of stuff. So fun cars have become more important to me than power.
Yeah.
And powerful cars are fun, right? But and Doug, you know what I'm talking about, man. You drive a DeLorean, for crying out loud, right? So it's a quirky car. That's not a great car either, but it's a great conversation starter and it's a lot of fun.
And
so
it's history.
And
it's history,
It's
right?
American history.
And it makes
American
people
history and
smile.
automotive history meet your history. You got it.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
that's a
And
good
and so
tagline.
with the Trabant. So in one of my trips to Iceland, because my wife is from there and we go frequently. Fortunately, I love it there. So a friend of hers that she grew up with was daily driving a Trabant, and so I said, oh well. She said, oh, you gotta see Bowie's car. You gotta see Bowie's car. So um, Bowie, who has become a friend of mine over the years too. Not only did he show me his Trabant, but in 2014 in the snow, I got to drive his Trabant. And it's the second time in my life somebody said, yeah, man, just punch the gas and sidestep the clutch, let her rip. Right. Um, the other time it happened to me, it was in a Chevelle with a big block, and things held together, and that was a lot of fun. But the Trabant was somehow more fun with, and he had upgraded the cylinder heads on his, so I think he was putting out almost 26 horsepower, compared to the 18 that mine develops. So, um,
Yeah.
but it was a lot of fun, man, and it was as much fun as being a little kid the first time you drive a go-kart. Except maybe the go-kart was a little bit more refined. So the Trabant was terrible, and I was taken aback. The shifting pattern of the Trabant is very strange. It's not like a three on a tree. The shifter comes out of the dash, and it has a sort of
Oh.
imagine shifting a three on the tree with your left foot. Right. And that's what it's like to drive a Trabant for the first time. It just feels so unnatural, and you're sort of looking for the gears and trying to figure out the pattern and pushing, pulling,
Oh, wow.
when to go up, when to go down. Right. And this angry little weed eater engine that's screaming, and you feel like you're driving a Trabant at any
Well,
speed.
two-stroke engine, right?
It is. It's a two-stroke,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
two cylinders, two
Two-cylinder, right?
strokes. Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. And I laugh when I pop my hood and people are like, wait, it has two coils? I say, yeah, this is the performance model. But in truth, they're all that way, right? Because they're both just kind of on. And then, but no, it's a super simple thing. And by anybody's standards, it's a terrible, terrible car, right? But if you think about behind the Iron Curtain, right?
Yes.
In communist East Germany, and having a lack of resources, a lack of skilled labor force, a lack of funding, a desperate need for automobiles. From 19 they so mine is the 601 model. And from 1963 to 1989, they built about 3 million cars, and they're rumored to be as many as 500,000 of them still on the road.
Wow.
And so by my metrics, it's not a terrible car, right? It's a terrible
Okay.
car by 2024 standards.
That's right.
But but if you look at the simplicity of it, there's 5 moving parts in the engine, right? And so it is so reliable and easy to work on, and just you're not going to get anywhere in a hurry. I joke, I said, well, it does 0 to 50 in about a minute, and it'll do 50 to 60 in about 3 minutes more, right? So
Now,
but
was
it works, and it's so
Yeah,
much fun,
absolutely does. So I think yours wasn't yours the third generation of the model, and one that was so
Big.
passable as vehicles there. It had like a 30-year production run. Did it something close to that, didn't it?
Yeah. So
Surprising, yeah.
63 was the first year of the 601s, and then and it was the mass produced one. So the majority of them are limousines, or the 2-door sedan version. It seats 4 adults, and then mine is the combi, or the wagon version. Interestingly, the rear door on the wagons is all sheet metal, but other than the panel just below the grill, it's the only sheet metal that you can see on the exterior of the car. The cars are made with it's like a fiberglass. It's similar to fiberglass, but it's a resin impregnated fibers, and they use recycled clothing and blankets and things to source the fibers.
Yep, from cotton.
Whatever they had.
There's great YouTube videos about Trabant production, and you can see guys, cutting, trimming the edges of the panels, and there's a couple of them, like literally there's on the assembly line, they're trying to fit the doors, and so the guy will open the door and stick a block of wood in it and slam the door about 5 times, and then he pulls the wood out and he closes the door. He's like, that's good,
close enough. Yeah.
Right, close enough. But it was funny. One time, one of the days, I was driving the Trabant around town, and this woman starts waving at me furiously. And I thought, oh, she just thinks my car's on fire, right? Because the smoke coming out of the tailpipe and whatever.
Yep, I saw that smoke.
But she's waving me in. And so I pull over, and she was so excited. She said, oh my God, it's a Trabant. It's a Trabant. And I said,
she knew.
Okay, she knew, right? So what? We got something in common. And I said, how do you know Trabant? And she said, well, years ago, my husband and I went to Budapest for business, and there was a problem with our rental car reservation, and we couldn't get a car. And someone sold us a Trabant in the parking lot, and we drove it around Budapest for 2 weeks. And when we went back to the airport, we just left the keys in it, and we gave it away. We just left it there. And she said, does yours have hand warmers? And I said, what? And she said, and she runs around to the back of the car, and she looks at my back window, and she says, sort of in dismay, oh, you don't have the hand warmers. And I said, what? And she said, the lines that go across the glass, they keep your hands warm when you're pushing it in the wintertime. And I thought that was
the
really
performance
funny.
model. Yes.
Yeah, right.
It wasn't the utility model. It was the performance model.
Yeah, it wasn't the wagon. The wagon version.
Yeah.
Is it true? Sorry, Andrew, to dispel a myth. Is it true that some animals have actually chewed up parts of Trabants?
I'm sure that if they did, they met an untimely demise.
Oh, sure.
The moths were after the wool.
Yeah, it's probably not good in the tummy, but I thought I read some pigs have chewed on them, gnawed on them.
Well, I think they were looking for any way to get rid of them, because they burned a few, I think, and realized that the smoke is super toxic.
Yes.
And I've heard rumors that they ground a bunch of them up and used them as winter traction, and as a affordable alternative to sand, because the cars, they die and they don't go away. So elemental reclamation is not a thing with Duraplast.
How many Trabants are in the U.S.? Do you know? I bet you have a good idea.
Well, so it's around 200. It would be difficult to come. There's a few that have snuck in under the radar of customs, but there's a lot of them that are out and about. And there's a fella in Baltimore I've come to know. He has 11 or 12. He and his son have I know of as the largest collection. The first Trabant I bought was actually with no motor or no engine, and I was going to put an electric motor in it, but I bought it from a fella in Indiana and he had 9 Trabants, and he was torn because he said, "Well, I have one I'll sell you, but it's my only wagon, it's my only combi, and so I'm
There,
I'm
I'll
I'm
take it.
hesitant." But we made a deal and got that done. And both of those fellas are big into the parade of Trabants at the Spy Museum. So mid-November, or second weekend of November in DC, there will be often like 40 or 50 Trabants, and they attract some Ladas and some Zatostavas and some other Soviet cars, and they set
Mhm.
up a cardboard version of the Berlin Wall, and they crash through it on the streets
Oh,
of
that I
Oh,
DC.
can't.
that's
I
neat.
gotta see that
So
now.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
you kind of have to. You kind of have to.
And that's
Um,
wow. So between and that's a great theme for today is cars in movies or cars as they intersect with movies, car museums. So that's a wonderful way to sort of move this episode gracefully into the off ramp. But before we go here, Andrew, Doug's one of Doug's favorite things is how this podcast has become, well, unexpectedly or maybe expectedly, depending about family. And so he wanted you to recall some of your stories with your wife's new rule about procuring new cars, as well as anything you do for your kids that involves a scooter, which made me think of it when you mentioned earlier, kind of scooters and fiberglass.
yeah, right. So right. My wife sort of put her foot down. I don't view it as a problem. I view it as a solution, right? But
Clever
I have
solution.
some people think I have a problem with acquiring cars, and a lot of times they just find me, right? I mean, like if either
Sure.
one of you guys stumbled across a Trabant that needed to be rescued or saved, right? You'd probably reach out. You'd say, "Hey,
We
Andrew,
know
man,
who to go to.
yeah, right. You know a guy now." And so, right, cars find me, and I really don't go looking for them. But amongst my collection, or my wife's least favorite vehicle is a 1976 U-Haul truck. That has a different story, maybe an episode in and of itself at some point. But yeah, so she told me, she said, "Listen, you can't have any more cars." And so I said, okay, and then somebody called me on a car that I tried to, she had expressed interest in, and I tried to get for her and couldn't strike a deal. And about a year later, they called me. And so I made a deal, and I went and got her a 1960 Fiat 600, and I titled it in her name
There you
before
go.
I brought it home. And she said, "No more car. You can't have any more cars." And I said, "Honey, this one's not mine. It's yours."
There
Right.
you
And
go.
so
Quick thinking.
yeah, well, it was funny. My son really wanted me to, my youngest is 6, and he really wanted me to buy a 67 Cadillac not so long ago. And I said, "Buddy, Mama's not going to be happy if we buy this car. It is cool. It's cool, but Mama's not going to be happy if we buy this car." And
Yeah,
he said, "Daddy, just give it to her." And I said, "Buddy, I love where your head is, right?
doing our
But
best.
yeah, we're not going to do that. We're not going to get away with this one, so we're not going to
But
try it."
but now he
Um,
had a little consolation prize too because you've done a clever thing with the scooters and little fiberglass bodies on them for the younger folk.
yeah, so we about so a year ago in May of 2023, we were at a car show, and some guys that I've come to know through car shows, the big Ocean City car shows, are looking at the enthusiasm, and my son, who 5 at the time, um, is really into cars, and they said, "Man, I love his enthusiasm. He's such a good kid. I want to give him something. That I'm going to give him a pedal car body. Said, but you got to do something. You guys got to build something really cool with it. I bought it. I was going to do something. I never did it. It's been sitting in my garage for years. I want to give it to Julian. My son's name is Julian, right? So I said, "All right, man. Hey, thank you so much." And I wasn't sure if this was a real thing or if it would follow through, but it did. And so we get this 1962 Chevy Impala convertible fiberglass pedal car body, and it's literally just a raw body. And I'm
Yeah.
like, huh. So what are we going to do with this? And my son is a pretty good size height wise for a 5-year old already, and I'm like, man, he can ride a 2-wheeler. Like, he doesn't really want a pedal car. This is going to be very short lived. We ought to do something that even I could ride, right? Something that'll last for a few years. And so I went on Facebook Marketplace and I bought a mobility scooter that was no longer needed. And we tore all the mobility scooter stuff off of it. And we laid everything out. And believe it or not, the wheelbase was perfect. I had to narrow the scooter a little bit to get it to fit. So we did. And my son, we cleaned up and we sanded it and we did some body work and he primed it and he painted it and we taped off the bumpers and we did like rattle can chrome for bumpers and trim around the windshield and the grill and stuff. And we've got it loaded up with LED headlights and taillights and underglows. And he's won several trophies competing at car shows, not against pedal cars and other little kids, but so he's very proud of his 6 trophies. He has a really good time with it. And he said to me, Daddy, this is about 2 months ago. He said, Daddy, you need a scooter too, so we can cruise together. And I'm like, man, how do I?
Daddy has a problem with that.
How do I say no? And I'm like, well, it's not really a car, so Daddy's
probably
not going to get in trouble.
Loophole.
Right. And so I go,
absolutely.
I said, okay, this time I'm going to start with the scooter instead of starting with a body. Right. I'll start with the scooter and see where it goes. And my 15-year-old bonus daughter, so she's the daughter that came with my wife. We have 4 kids total, right? So my oldest is almost 22, and she's mine from my first marriage. And then I have a bonus son who's 20, a bonus daughter who's 15, and we have the 6-year-old that's ours together. But my bonus daughter, we're driving down the highway with her, and she said, "Oh God, there's one of those trash cans," right? And she's pointing to the Tesla Cybertruck. And I thought, what if I just get a stainless steel trash can to put on my scooter chassis? Because, people refer to these things as trash cans, and that would be funny. And I couldn't find one. And I thought, well, maybe I'll just get a piece of stainless steel sheet metal and build my own. And then I thought, wait a minute, I'll just build my own Cybertruck. And so my son has been learning how to use the metal brake, and we started with aluminum because it's a little easier to work with. And now we're bending up the stainless steel to make our Cybertruck mobility scooter. And it's just fun,
Yeah, man. So you and he will be able to cruise around your property. And I think that's the coolest thing, doing laps around the Trabant. I think is going to be fantastic. So in closing here, I got to ask, could we get some pictures of your scooters at some point and kind of share them with the listening audience? Because I just love what you do, man. I mean, it's family all the way. You're incorporating them at every step of your passion, and I just think it's great. It was really great to meet you, and thanks for spending some time with us.
Yeah, well, thank you guys so much. I'll be happy to pictures and links, and our plan with the scooters is so we'll be at the big Cruise in Ocean City show in Ocean City, Maryland in May, and we are going to ride in the boardwalk cruise. So from 27th Street down to the inlet on the boardwalk, there's a sort of a parade of cars, and he and I are planning on riding that together.
That's really neat.
Side.
So you've already got a deadline. You got a deadline to keep you honest, and it's something to shoot for. Well, thank you again.
Exactly.
Hey, it was great meeting you, Andrew. Thanks for spending some time with us this afternoon, man.
Yeah, man. Thank you guys so much.
Andrew. All right.
Complete blast.
See you soon at Cars and Coffee.
Yeah, I look forward to it.
See you soon.
Right.
Check
Maybe
us out
I'll build
online.
a DeLorean scooter.
Yeah.
Please do.
Challenge.
Yeah.
Challenge.
And I'll park next to Doug.
Very
Cool.
good.
All right, guys.
Well,
thank you so much.
Thank you for spending time with us. That's it. Where do we start here? The Trabant, the Chevy, all the scooters,
The Tuckers
that he's loved before. Talking Tuckers. Dig it. Oh, the AECA museum that we mentioned before at the top of the hour has a nice collection of, I'm going to say half dozen, as well as suspension assemblies, possibly a chassis. I think a cutaway motor of the Tucker there too.
Several motors, including one of the, sorry, I'm doing it again. One of the original air-cooled ones before they made them water-cooled. They came from helicopters.
Oh, yeah. Oh, you can also check out carslove.com/ACCA. Carslove.com/ACCA will take you by way of our site to theirs. That's it. Another episode of the book. Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you soon.